500 million years ago, the ocean was full of monsters, and not one of them could bite. We know because their mouths are in the rock, rings of hard plates, and no jaw. For something like the first 100 million years that Earth had apex predators, the jaw did not exist. Not in the hunters, not in anything. Watch what that means. In shallow Cambrian water, the largest predator alive closes on a trilobite. Two spined arms sweep forward and lock. It is caught. And then nothing happens. The hunter turns it over, feels along the shell for a way in, finds none. It lets go, grasping claws, stalked eyes, and no way to open an armored animal the size of a hand. The monsters were real. The bite had not been invented yet. Every survey of these oceans ranks the monsters by size. Biggest claw, longest shell. That ranking hides the real story. Across 6 periods, Cambrian to Permian, about 290 million years, the top job in the ocean changed hands exactly once. The fossils record it. It passed from animals without jaws to animals with them. It has never gone back. This Codex entry follows the handover through 6 predators, 1 per period, and the moment it turns on was only dated 4 years ago, in a rock face in southern China. The animal that could not open a trilobite lost to a hinge. Everything else did too. A jaw is a hinge in the head, a toothed arch opening and closing against a braced skull. It separates 2 entirely different kinds of animal. The jaw was not built from nothing. It was rebuilt from arches that already existed in the throat, supporting the gills. The ocean's most consequential weapon started as part of a breathing apparatus. A jaw is not an add-on. It is a rebuild of the head, which is why the change is so hard to reverse. Without a jaw, a predator can grip. The hunter in that opening scene gripped. A squid's beak grips and tears at soft flesh. A sea scorpion's pincers grip and hold. What gripping cannot do is process. It cannot shear a shell along a line. It cannot concentrate force on one spot until something breaks. It cannot take a piece out of prey larger than itself and leave. That sets a ceiling. A gripping predator's menu is capped by what it can catch and swallow more or less whole, smaller than the hunter or soft or both. It is why the early oceans were full of large animals eating very small things. A jaw removes the ceiling. Armor stops being a wall and becomes a problem with a solution. The menu opens and it never closes again. 6 periods, 6 predators. One question underneath: who holds the top and what is in their mouth? The Burgess Shale in the Canadian Rockies preserves a 508 million-year-old ocean in unfair detail. Even so, its largest predator took 90 years to put together. In 1892, a paleontologist read a spiny fossil from the nearby Mount Stephen beds as the body of an odd shrimp and named it Anomalocaris. What he had was an arm. In 1911, Charles Walcott catalogued a flattened ring as a jellyfish and a second specimen as a sea cucumber. What he had was a mouth and a body. 3 names, 3 drawers. Then, in the early 1980s, Harry Whittington chipped the rock off old material and found the arms attached to a head, with the jellyfish seated exactly where a mouth belongs. And the reassembly did not produce 1 animal, it produced 2. The mouth and the body were a single species. The odd shrimp was the arm of a different animal, a close relative, and the one that kept the name, Anomalocaris canadensis. About 25 centimeters in the most complete specimen. Fragments hint at larger. Flaps down each side for swimming. Stalked compound eyes with tens of thousands of lenses. 2 spined arms that closed like a cage, and behind them, a mouth of overlapping plates that squeezed rather than cut. For a century, It was cast as the animal that broke trilobites open. The rock holds healed, W-shaped injuries that match its mouth. Then, in 2023, an engineering study in Proceedings of the Royal Society B loaded digital models of those arms and found they would deform against hard trilobite armor. Built for soft prey and for speed, the scars remain unexplained. One reconciliation: the victims were freshly molted and still soft. What is settled is the ceiling. The Cambrian ends with the top of the food chain held by a hunter the length of a forearm. The next period's answer is not a better weapon. It is more animal. By 470 million years ago, the predators at the top were largely cephalopods, nautiloids with straight, chambered cone shells held horizontal in the water, tentacles and a hard beak at the open end. A beak cuts. It is still not a jaw. Two halves of one structure meeting at a tip, no shear along a line. You will usually see these animals given 9 meters, 30 feet. That number traces to a single 1955 report of a shell in a New York quarry. The quarry was destroyed. No specimen was kept. No photograph exists. That is more than triple the longest orthocone anyone has measured. And the number is usually pinned on Carboniferous, when the confirmed giant is a different animal entirely. Endoceras giganteum, a 3-meter fragment reconstructed in 1960, gives a complete shell of roughly 6 meters. A small car, not a bus, still the largest animal on Earth at that moment, by a wide margin. The Ordovician's answer was not a new mechanism, it was scale. Get long enough, and the ceiling stops mattering, because almost everything is smaller than you. It worked. Cephalopods held the top of the ocean for the only stretch in the whole fossil record they ever have. But size has no margin. The late Ordovician ended in ice and mass extinction. Food webs collapsed from the bottom, and the giant nautiloids never took the top slot again. 2 periods. 2 body plans, 1 limitation: grip or grow. The animal that changes everything is already alive, 3 centimeters long, and nobody was watching it. The Silurian's apex predator is another gripping animal, the best one yet, Pterygotus. A sea scorpion up to 1.75 meters, longer than most people are tall. It has toothed grasping claws, big, forward-facing eyes, paddle legs that made it a pursuit hunter, not an ambusher, no sting. The tail ends in a flat rudder, and no jaw. Vertebrates were already in these seas. Jawless, armored fish. They fed by suction, because drawing food in is all a mouth without a hinge can do. They were successful. They were diverse. They were irrelevant to who ran the ocean. Armor without a weapon. For most of a century, nobody could say when Jaws arrived. The evidence was a scatter of scales and spines, and the date moved every time somebody reread a fragment. Then came the 28th of September, 2022. 4 papers, published together in Nature. They described fossil beds in Guizhou and Chongqing, in southern China, dated between 436 and 439 million years ago. In the Guizhou beds, Andreev and colleagues found tooth whorls from an animal named Edestus. At roughly 439 million years, they are the oldest certain remains of a toothed vertebrate ever found. The Chongqing beds held something rarer, whole animals. Shoshan Ossteus is a complete armored fish, 3 centimeters long, small enough to sit on a fingernail, and a whole skeleton settles arguments a loose scale cannot. Together, the beds pushed the origin of jaws and teeth back by close to 14 million years. The handover stopped being a guess and became an event with a date. Here is what that date means in the water. While those fish were alive, Pterygotus was more than 50 times their length. They were not competition. They were not even prey worth chasing. Most surveys treat first appearance as the moment something starts to matter. It almost never is. The gap between the jaw showing up and the jaw winning is about 80 million years. That is longer than the dinosaurs' entire reign. For most of that gap, the most important structure in vertebrate history was attached to animals nothing was afraid of. The Silurian ends with an arthropod on the throne. And the thing that will end arthropod rule is already in the water, fully formed, at 3 centimeters. The Devonian is called the Age of Fishes, and the placoderms earn it first. Armored fish plated over the head and shoulders. The one everybody knows is Dunkleosteus terrelli from the Cleveland Shale in Ohio. It has no teeth. The edges of its jaw bones are the weapon, sharpened into blades that grind against each other and resharpen with every bite. How hard it bit and how the mechanism worked is its own entry in this codex. Its size has come down, hard. In 2023, Russell Engelman rebuilt the estimate from a different measurement, the distance from eye socket to gill cover, which tracks total length across nearly 1,000 living fish species. A typical adult comes out at about 3.4 meters, roughly half the animal in most museum halls. Hold on to that. Dunkleosteus is not the largest animal in this story. Endoceras was longer. It does not take the top of the ocean by being bigger. It takes it by being a different kind of animal. It can bite. It can take a piece out of prey it cannot swallow, including prey wearing armor, which until this moment had been a reliable defense. The ceiling that capped every apex predator for 130 million years is simply gone. Across the Devonian, jawed fish move into almost every marine predatory role there is. The sea scorpions decline through the same interval and never stand at the top again. Neither do the cephalopods, not in the Devonian, not in the 400 million years since. The chair has changed hands. What happens next is the winning design starts getting strange. The placoderms do not survive the end of the Devonian. The jaw does. The inheritors are early relatives of sharks, cartilage skeletons that rarely fossilize, so for most of them, teeth are all we have. An entire age of predators, known almost entirely from mouths. The oddest of them is Edestus. Picture a shark, then replace each jaw with a single curved blade of teeth running down the midline. Nothing is ever shed. New teeth push the old ones forward, and the row accumulates into an exposed saw that grows for the animal's whole life. For decades, nobody could work out how it fed. The blades meet each other, instead of closing against a surface. In 2018, Leif Tapanila's group modeled the skull and found the answer. The blades snap together, while the lower one slides backward toward the throat. A bite that cuts and pulls at once, on a double-jointed hinge with no close match in any living fish. Nothing alive today feeds like this. And Edestus is not a one-off. Its whole group ran wild. Blades, spirals, interlocking cutting ranks, some with no agreed function. 50 million years after the jaw took the ocean, evolution is not refining it. It is playing with it. That is what a design that has already won looks like. The strangest experiment took us a century to understand. In 1899, a Russian geologist described a fossil from the Ural Mountains that made no sense. A flat spiral of teeth the size of a dinner plate, growing larger around the curve. He named it Helicoprion, spiral saw. Where the teeth went was anyone's guess, because the rest of the animal was cartilage, and cartilage does not survive. For the next 100 years, the whorl was put almost everywhere. On the snout, curling forward, on the upper jaw, in the throat, on the dorsal fin, on the tail, as a weapon. Serious researchers published each of these, because with no skull preserved, there was nothing to rule any of them out. The answer came from scanning, not digging. In 2013, a team led by Leif Tapanila, the same researcher whose group would go on to crack Edestus 5 years afterwards, CT scanned specimen IMNH 37899, pulled from an Idaho mine in 1950 and sitting in a museum ever since. The scan showed the impressions of cartilage around the teeth. The whorl sat in the lower jaw. It was the lower jaw, filling the mandible from hinge to tip. New teeth grew at the back, old ones rotated inward, and the animal never lost a tooth in its life. From the outside, it would have looked almost ordinary. The strangest mouth in the fossil record was hidden inside it. This codex opened on the same problem. The Cambrian's great predator spent 90 years scattered across 3 drawers, because nobody could picture the animals the pieces made. Helicoprion spent 100 wearing its jaw in the wrong place, for the same reason. Both mistakes were about mouths. Neither was about competence. Helicoprion survives until the Permian ends, and the Permian ends worse than anything before or since. What comes out the other side is a diminished ocean. What it is not is an ocean that reconsiders. Everything that has held the top of the open ocean since the Devonian has had a jaw. After the Permian, marine reptiles take the ocean. Ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, all jawed. After the Cretaceous ends them, sharks and whales, Otodus megalodon, the sperm whale, today the orca, all jawed. Different lineages, separated by mass extinctions that emptied the top of the ocean and reopened the competition. The winners changed every time. The mechanism never did. Every audition, a different cast, the same equipment. Be precise about the claim. Large invertebrates are still here. The colossal squid runs 4.5 meters, longer than anything in this codex. Size was never the argument. Sperm whales hunt colossal squid, and the sperm whale's lower jaw is lined with teeth the size of a hand. The top has been closed to gripping animals since the Devonian. That is a reading of the record, not a law of nature, but it has held for 400 million years through every mass extinction in every ocean on the planet, all of which brings this codex back to where it opened. A predator with excellent eyes and 2 of the best grasping arms in the ocean, holding a trilobite it could not open and letting it go. It was not beaten by something stronger. It was beaten by a hinge in an animal 3 centimeters long that would not matter for another 80 million years. And that hinge did not stay in the ocean. The jaw in your face is the same structure, the same repurposed throat arches, working against a braced skull, inherited without interruption from Silurian fish nothing was afraid of. Every time you close your mouth, you are using the mechanism that took the ocean. The first monsters were real. Fast, well-armed, some of them 6 meters long. What they were missing was not power. It was the thing that ended them. 400 million years after the handover, the mechanism reached its largest and most refined form, in a warm ocean full of whales, in the jaws of the largest shark the ocean has ever produced. Everything about that shark is famous, except the part that matters. We argue about how big it was and what it looked like. Almost nobody asks what it did with the jaw. The whales it hunted are still in the rock, carrying the marks, and the marks do not describe a monster that swam at things and closed its mouth. They describe a hunter that went for one part of the animal first, on purpose, and waited. The bones recorded the whole thing. So what was it going for? And why does the damage keep showing up in the same place?